All that I can hope is you take me with you when you go. I guess I should have known I can't leave with you when you go. Now Cow Island is awfully quiet, with your screen door staying closed. And if I learned French like you told me, baby, I would hear your ghost.
It's I don't know. It's been interesting, kind of capturing these little points of view from all the different units and eras. I mean, obviously, if we did this forever, we could get everything. But you know, we've a little bit of Canadians pre-Medusa, pretty decent amount of info about Medusa, both from the Canadians and the SF guys.
Yeah,
the interview with the Lav driver, was a really good one.
The Battle of the White School.
He was. Yeah, he was in the lead Lav, pushed into the White School, like the point of the spear of the objective.
Yeah.
Like he's like, yeah, and then the vehicle behind us got hit by a recoilless, and then we pulled back, and they got hit by a recoilless. I'm like, oh my god.
Yeah, those dudes got their ship pushed in for probably a couple, for that day, that
48
first
hours.
Days,
Just some really cool perspectives, and then, and then here we are with Colonel, full-bird Colonel.
Old Colonel.
Old Colonel. You go by Trey Rutherford, right?
Yep, Trey Rutherford.
Rutherford. Oh, man. God, you caught me early on that one.
Yeah.
And Trey was the battalion commander for 1st and 23rd Infantry out of Fort Lewis, Washington, to which Luke and I were attached as part of, I guess, Task Force Tomahawk.
Yep.
In 2012. So we're sitting here with him at the United States Military Academy of West Point. So it's actually kind of a very cool opportunity, which we very much appreciate the hospitality and inviting us out here and sitting down with us in this is the class of 1963 conference room.
Correct.
Yeah.
Pretty wild.
A lot of history here. So.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's one of the things driving around earlier, just, this is where X, Y, and Z happened, and this is where, the history in the Northeast is always fascinating to me, because especially, if you get west of the Appalachian Mountains, if it's 200 years old, it's old, and if you get way out west, you get in the Rocky Mountains, if it's 100 years old, it's old. So it's kind of cool to be around here and see stuff that's 3 and maybe even 350.
1802 is when this place started.
That's
so
really
there's stuff here from 1802 on. So
yeah. And that's just the military presence, Henry Hudson was working his way up the river, I don't know, probably 350 years ago. So it's cool. It's a neat place.
Well, it's different. I've been in the Western United States the last 5 years. There's no history like that out there. I mean, history out there started in the
1900, basically.
1900s, really.
Yeah.
Everything in Alaska is 1950s.
1950s
and on. We don't get anything kind of that kind of history.
World War happy II to get a new road up there.
Yeah. You did some time in Alaska, didn't you?
As a kid, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Cool.
Trey, the way we kind of open these things up is give you opportunity to kind of tell us a little bit about your background, how you came to join the military, why you chose infantry as your branch, and then kind of a little bit of background of your previous deployment history and kind of leading us up to this, our deployment in Panjwai in 2012.
Yeah, so I'm 7th generation Army guy. So since about 1856, somewhere in there, that's when kind of my family started in the Army side. Wasn't predisposed to be an Army dude, but hearing the stories from my father and my grandfathers and their grandfathers, I kind of knew I was predisposed towards being in the military.
Sure.
Kind of wanted to be a submariner, but when I visited Naval Academy, they looked like Popeye, so I was like, nah, I can't do that. So I ended up coming here to West Point in 1989 when the Soviet Union still existed. So like a lot of us that came then, we were all focused on, hey, at some point we're going to have this epic battle against the Soviet Union on the plains of Northern Europe. picturing tactical nukes and
Sure.
tank formations and all that type of thing. But, my yearling year, my sophomore year here at West Point, the Soviet Union disappeared. Like, holy crap.
What do you do now?
What am I here for?
Yeah.
Right.
So a lot of people were doing some soul searching. And of course, President Clinton said, hey, we're going to reduce the Army by 50%. Deployments are going to go down. And then I graduate. And the only thing I ever wanted to be was an infantryman. My father had been an infantryman in Vietnam. My grandfather had been a combat engineer with infantrymen in World War II and Korea and Vietnam. There's no other branch that really.
You heard it here, folks.
There's no other branch.
Later in life, I commanded armor brigade. So whether it's an infantry formation or infantry style of leadership, it has a huge impact across the Army. But
Sure.
I came out of here and went to Europe. Not sure what was going to happen. So my first duty was in 1st Brigade, 1st Armor Division. And everything was disappearing in Europe. They were downsizing. The Soviet Union wasn't a threat anymore, but I ended up spending 32 or 36 months deployed while there, doing the first NATO Partnership for Peace in Poland.
Okay.
Holy smokes, trying to inject some U.S. thoughts there.
Poland after the wall fell had to have been rough.
Whoa.
Yeah.
When we came across the border, it was my first deployment, and literally the Poles lined the entire highway 8 deep with homemade American flags, all the way to Poznan, where we were doing the first Partnership for Peace, which, was trying to get them to want to come over to the NATO side. It's funny, I go back there as a brigade commander, my headquarters near Poznan, and being able to communicate to the Poles, holy crap, can you feel how much your country has changed in the last, 28 years? To them, they don't see that. So they're very excited to hear that. So I got to do that, got to spend about 9 months on a UN mission separating the Serbians from the Macedonians along the border down there, stopping black market smuggling. So got some experience with the UN. I do another Partnership for Peace in Czech Republic, again, trying to get them to come into NATO. And then final thing, as a lieutenant, got to be a scout platoon leader in Company XO in Bosnia and I-4. So, one of the first units going across the Sava River Bridge and trying to figure out how to separate belligerents with no guidance and that type of thing. Went to the Aviation Officer Advanced course after that because, need to do something different.
Fort Rucker?
At beautiful Mother Rucker in the ugly corner of Lower Alabama, a.k.a. UCLA.
UCLA.
Yeah, that was interesting, especially being the only infantryman down there. So that was good. And then got to go to the 82nd, where I spent, about 4 years working on division staff, brigade staff, and being a company commander, where we didn't deploy a lot, but we trained our asses off. And, it was strictly about standards and timelines and being ready to fight wherever the country. So it kind of inculcated in me at that time, really, the importance of being ready.
Sure. And is that where you worked with Rusty when he was a conventional officer?
Yeah.
Right?
Yep. So we're both in 3505. I think he was a AT platoon leader when I was a company commander there. We didn't see the stardom then, but we knew it was there under the surface.
Yeah. Was he just as crusty back then as he is now?
He was a crusty old guy that, like if you had to predict if that was the dude that was going to do that he was doing in the future, that was probably not who you'd have picked. But that's, after there, I spent a number of years down at JRTC. So I gave up company command, went to JRTC, and 3 months later, 9/11 happened. So I just give up company command. I'm stuck down in JRTC doing 22 rotations just over and over and over again, which is kind of the interesting thing because, what I learned down there, sometimes the shittiest soldier ends up being the hero in the platoon.
Yeah.
So if we can, we're kind of defined by the mosaic of the soldiers and the leaders that we're given. But if we can lift everybody, a little bit, it's amazing what folks can achieve. A threatened branch while I was at JRTC, I'm like, hey, there's a war going on. Can you get me somewhere where I make a difference? Or I'm going to leave the Army and go be a bus driver or something like that. And so they sent me to Guantanamo. So got to spend a year in Guantanamo doing some interesting stuff.
Sure.
met my current wife down there in Guantanamo. She was not a detainee.
Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah.
Did a couple deployments over to Iraq, right after the time of the invasion and the year after that, working in counterterrorism and detention and interrogation task force over there. And then, came back for CGSC, so got to spend a year at Fort Leavenworth kind of figuring out what the hell I was going to do.
Sure.
And then got to go back to the 82nd, where I got to be a Brigade S4, Battalion S3, Battalion XO, Brigade XO. And then the Army decided to send me to Europe, where I got to command a company of 2 para. During that time, field grade time as a major in the 82nd, went over for the surge in 2006. We did a 16-month deployment to Sadr City.
But that was a hell yeah time.
Which is where I first had my interaction with 123 Infantry, which they were the shit in Iraq. Like, they made every other unit I came in contact look like absolute garbage. I mean, Ranger Regiment, Special, they were wired tight. They had a guy named Van Smiley, who was a battalion commander, and just the presence that he brought and that exuded through the unit, I'm like, holy crap, I want to be part of that.
Were they already on strikers then?
Yeah, they were strikers then. I think that was their second deployment at the time. And I got used to having different companies attached to the battalion and how do you integrate them into a team. And then got to do that thing in Europe with 2 para. So got to command them, deploy them down to northern Kenya, along the Somali border for Operation Grand Prix. Interesting experience with the Brits. I was supposed to deploy with them, the Helmand, but I got selected to command my own battalion, which ended up being 123.
Yeah.
Which when I showed up, it was not the battalion that I knew before.
When did you show up to 123?
I showed up there in 2010, somewhere around there. I took command like early, 2010. It all kind of bleeds together.
Sure,
now, they had just come back from Operation New Dawn, where they were doing like
fucking nothing,
school makeovers and all that type of thing, and still had some of that sense of history of what I'd seen during the surge, but they had just kind of dropped down to the lowest common denominator. So it was a tough fight to. We weren't sure what the battalion was going to do, but I knew we were going to get called to do something. Sure. So how do we get ready for that? So initially it was, how do we focus on near peer fight and make everything as tough as humanly possible. And then the rest of the brigade got notified that they were going to deploy to Afghanistan, and we weren't. So they started thinning out 123. And then we got hit with, hey, you're going to do village stability operations. So I, task organized the whole battalion to do that stuff, and sent PFCs to Berkeley to learn about farming in Afghanistan. Broke up teams to go all over with 1st Group and 7th Group, took all the leadership down to get certified on that. And then like 30 days before we were supposed to deploy, we got remission to be a battle space owner in RC South, which is totally different than me in a VSO. So 30 days before, I had to re-task organize the entire battalion back into platoons and companies. But we had ruthless training before then, ruthless understanding of what the standard was going to be. So that was painful, but it wasn't that bad.
So that was, I guess, like right before your NTC rotation is when you found out you were going back to being a battle space owner.
No.
Really?
It was after. So we did VSO garbage at NTC.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. That was interesting.
That's quite a shift.
How did you handle that from the battalion commander's perspective? Did you just like hammer down on your company commanders, your PLs, your NCOs, or did you?
So you got to be very clear and message sent and message received. Like I mentioned before, basic standards and discipline lead to the ability to achieve success in anything else you want to do. So, I mean, pretty ruthless when it came to raising people to their full potential.
Right.
Very clear on expectations with platoon leaders. Spent, hours and hours and hours with platoon leaders. So there was like 0 mils between, what they thought I expected and what was expected.
Yeah.
Tons of time with first sergeants and company commanders and battalion staff and all that type of thing. That's where we developed the Tomahawk red lines and, the SOPs and that type of thing.
So when you guys got remissioned to do the battle, that you knew you were going to Panjwai and that area as soon as you got that switch in mission. So
I had the dudes, they're getting ready to do platoon live fires. Y'all were heading into NTC.
Mm-hmm.
123 is getting ready to do platoon live fires, but I had to go get eyes on the battle space. So I went over there and wow, Panjwai is a little bit different than, a lot of places that I've been before with the grape rows and the grape huts and micro terrain and all that type of thing. So, I'm calling back and they're conducting platoon live fires in 3 foot of snow, so we couldn't replicate grape rows and all that. So I'm find the area with the most deadfall. I want it to be impossible to move through.
Right.
It's got to be the most challenging shit these dudes have ever seen. And there's no freebies. I want, there's got to be casualty play. There's got to be everything that's got to be involved in here. And so once I saw that, that's when they let me know, hey, you might be getting a couple companies from Third ID.
You're like, oh, fuck. Baby tankers.
I mean, so my experience in Iraq before, where we receive armor companies that be attached to us, or we receive a striker company, or we receive an ODA. Very comfortable with the attachment thing.
Yeah.
It's just how you deliver a message to folks that aren't part of your team. So, so I called back to the brigade commander. I'm like, I don't want to come back to watch the last little bit of the platoon live fires. I need to get to NTC and I need to look the leaders that are going to be working with us in the eye.
Yeah.
So luckily, Armstrong, Chuck, we were friends, so knew each other. God, he was gracious on. It's very hard for a commander sometimes to
share,
kind of let go a little bit. So being able to fly in there and getting the OCs to drive out there, and I get to sit with Captain Graham, Captain Kitching, and the first sergeants and some of the staff, and go, let me show you, let me explain to you what the fight is. It is nothing that you've we didn't prepare for it.
Right. Yeah.
We're doing everything we can right now to build the intellectual capacity and kind of the grit to be able to deal with that type of fight. So, I brought my S2 and we, I think we were in y'all's battalion talk, and it's I'm going to lay it out absolutely as clear as humanly possible. Between Kitching and Graham, they had some good questions and that type of thing. But, and I think sitting down with Colonel Armstrong, I'm like, hey, these dudes are going into different type fight than the rest of your battalion's going to go into. And then as we go back, then we find out, hey, you're going to get another company from 117 and you're going to get another company from 520. And, I think we had 9 different companies rotate through the
crazy.
And some of them just for short periods of time.
Right. Because 117 was a shorter period of time, right?
Yeah. And Bravo, I think they were bayonets also, or was Bravo 520 was bayonets also. But, so we tried to paint the picture so we could be realistic, and talking with Graham and Kitching on, and just don't sugarcoat crap.
Yeah,
they did.
It definitely did not get sugarcoated. At NTC after you came, we half jokingly referred to it as the "Come to Jesus" talk, and that we all got set down by the platoon sergeants and PLs, stuff like that. And this is what we're going into. This is what we can expect. We're gonna lose dudes. We're gonna get fucked up. It was, we were prepped. Well,
I tried to communicate what I saw there also. So we basically, and no offense to the units that were there before us, but they had taken quite a few hits in the face.
Yeah.
And, so my impression, they just had some suicides and, so they were focused on self-preservation at the time.
Sure.
And their sphere of influence outside their tactical infrastructure was about the range of an M4.
Mm-hmm.
And then you had some ODAs doing their own stuff that wasn't synchronized by anybody.
Right.
You had USAID coming in doing absolutely nothing synchronized. And
right.
You had, Corps of Engineers coming in doing nothing. Because you had a brigade that was, sitting up in Mossingar that was responsible for everything. But that, to me, there didn't appear to be unity of effort. So I was excited that they were going to put Panjwai under 123. And even with the task organization of additional units in, I had no worries or concerns, especially knowing Chuck and the reputation of y'all's battalion at the time. I don't know how in depth you want to go, or you want to go through a background, keep going through that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one thing I was really curious about is obviously we had our Charlie company at Kenchikak, and then we were at Sperwangar, and Sperwangar is key terrain. It's really prominent, and I'll be honest, it's really nice. So it was. How did the decision go into like which companies were going to go to which cops and fobs?
Based on my understanding and read of the fight that we would see, which the brigade that were replaced, the battalions that were replaced, did not paint a picture of anything major.
Right.
So I thought we could buy some time to bring a mechanized company in that, will divorce from what they, all the gunnery stuff that they've had to do and the table 12s and all that type. I know how it is. And they'd have time to grow into the battle space.
Sure.
And then with, the armor company over at Kenchikak, I could reinforce them by giving them mortar platoon, make them infantrymen, so they had some capability. And then, I thought the hardest fight was going to be out in Mushan, right at the tip of the horn. So that's where I, put the company with the most combat experience and what I perceived as the most grit. And
that was Alpha Company, right?
Yeah, Apache company out there. So as the area around Sperwangar developed, that changed.
Yeah.
As the fight south of Talakan developed, that changed. As the area out in Mushan and out at the tip just blew up. I was trying to figure out how to, create the scenario where y'all could be successful in what we were asking you to do, which was not sit and wait to be blown up.
Right.
There's a lot more to setting of the conditions that I can go into. Had family friends that were the car's eyes. So first thing I did when I found out that I was going to Panjwai was reach out to Qayyum Karzai, who's the President Karzai's older brother. Help me understand, what's going on out there. And he explained, ask him, hey, what is the U.S. doing that, or what aren't they doing that they should be doing? So we had some discussions about the cons that actually own the terrain there. So when we got into Afghanistan, I actually called him using y'all's, one of y'all's interpreters. Y'all had an interpreter that was really good. I can't remember the dude's name, but I'm like, hey, here's Qayyum Karzai's telephone number. Can you call him? And dude, start shaking. I'm like, call him. He's in his castle in Kars. It's like 30 kilometers over there. Give him a call. And we finally got in touch with him. And so through some meetings and all that, they were like, hey, if y'all are successful this fighting season, which at that point I didn't really understand fighting season in Panjwai.
Right. Yeah.
If y'all are successful in truly defeating the Taliban presence in Panjwai, that the cons and the true leaders of Panjwai and Maywand and all that type of thing, that they would support a popular uprising.
Right.
So I knew we had a period of time, and going into the fight there, I knew I didn't want to sit back and take punches to the face.
Right.
I knew that there's an obstacle belt called the IEDs that surrounded all our things. So if we could get past that, if we could get beyond that and start taking the fight to them, that it would change the dynamic, that we weren't sitting and waiting on getting, punched in the face.
So when we got there and we started, our company, but the entire battalion really started pushing out and testing the waters. So how soon did it come into your mind that this area has this going on, and at Sperwangar, east of Sperwangar, turns out there's a shit ton of Taliban there. When did you start to piece the puzzle together of what was actually going on in Panjwai?
I mean, for Zangabad West, I had a good picture from the beginning.
Yeah.
Everything in and around the Jat, that was more of a surprise, because I was dealing with some senior Afghan leaders up there in the district center that are from the Jat.
Yeah.
And they'd tell on anything else. I'd sit up there and, we're conducting kinetic strikes in and around Najat and some of the other villages there, but, they never really showed their hand until later.
Yeah.
So
I remember early on, we walked through Najat like it was no big deal. I mean, some of our first patrols just taking a stroll, and then we couldn't.
Well, if you remember, we started a lot like the Tomahawk Tufan and all the operations that we started really pushing, where we knew, these dudes were at, and they were very comfortable. They were comfortable training their IEDs and their VBID makers that were then going to project up into Kandahar for a spectacular attack. We know that there was a lot of training that was going on there that was then being exported out to, hey, we're going to hit this prison to release folks. So we put a lot of pressure where we thought they were, and that had some incredible effects, but that also pushed a lot of people to y'all's battle space that I didn't think that's where they were going to go.
Yeah.
Because it didn't make sense for them to go there. Unless they just want to take control of the market at Masamgar. Is that what you want to get postured to do? I mean,
well, that was weird. I mean, when we took over, everything was about the 2-8 grid line.
It's all west.
Everything was all west. That's all they talked about. They're like, yeah, if you go west, you're going to get hit. But I mean, maybe that was where our first firefight was, right south of Zangabadgar. But after that, I mean, I'd say 80% of all of our, casualties, contacts was all east, which was, no one before us had even mentioned anything east.
Yeah.
Actually, the unit that we replaced, that wasn't even their AO.
I think the dude's name was Haji Muhammad, and most perfect dark black beard in all of Kandahar. And like he was from Najat, and, and finally it's like, hey, they're there.
Yeah.
But he couldn't describe, is it 2 dudes? Is it
20
dudes?
Yeah.
Is it a IED cell? What is that that's going on there? But if you look at kind of again, not sure how much more background, or we just going to dive straight into
as much background as we can get. I mean, there's no limit.
Understanding the ANA that was there, the ANCOP battalion, the ANA that y'all had to work with, which is different than the ANA that was on Zangabad, which is different than the ANA on Talocan, which is different than the ANA that was on Mushan.
Yeah.
And, the dregs of the ANA that were on Cop Lion, the Soja Cats, our AUP that were in the area, those horrible Afghan local police.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
We had 2 ODAs, or 3 ODAs operating in the area, which, in my interaction with SOTF South, having trained to be the SOTF North commander when we were going to do BSO, my impression not synchronized with anything that the battle space owner was doing, like with a week before we took over Panjwai, Bellambai freaking happens, and, the SF kind of washes their hands of it, and, hey, it's y'all's to deal with. And,
how is that? I mean, like, you're within days of stepping on a plane to come over there, and, did you hear about it before it hit the news, or did you see that on the news and be like, oh,
no, I mean, I didn't. Yeah, the battalion commander at the time had shot me a note and like, holy crap.
Oh, man.
And which locally it wasn't a big deal. I mean, it's Bellambai. They were pissed off. They were embarrassed. The little village to the south was pissed off and embarrassed. But the village 2 kilometers over there could have cared less.
Yeah.
Now Kandahar cared. And Kabul cared. But the local Afghans there wasn't. I mean, everything came from external. So getting, Razik down there, the Afghan police commander for the province and all that type of thing, was able to create some calm.
How was your interactions with him?
It was good. I wish we could have gotten him down there more and with less gloves on. Very effective in dealing with Afghan problems in Afghan ways, which is not palatable a lot of times. But if we could maintain some control, it's like the special, I don't know if we had them come in the area, there's a special operations kind of ANCOP unit that would come into the battle space from time to time, which were incredible. We use them a lot around Talocan and kind of that no man's area between Mushan and Talocan. Yeah, but the ANA was all over the place.
Yeah.
And y'all's,
Ours was pretty rough.
and we had to drag those cats along.
Yeah.
Which I know was frustrating to everyone out there, but if we didn't drag them, then we're going to end up sitting back and waiting for people to punch us in the face.
Yeah.
So, it sucks sometimes. And, I know that there were casualties in 1, 2, 3 that were caused by ANA. As they did their death blossoms with their RPGs and weapons. That was disappointing. But we had some decent advisor teams that tried their best. It wasn't any different than the experience with our Iraqi partners.
Sure,
whether, the National Police or the Iraqi Army or whatever the case may be. So they didn't have high expectations. Communicated that very clearly with their, what was his name? General Habibi, that was his name. Their corps commander, and tried to work hard so that he'd stop sending soldiers that were from the north. So you send a bunch of soldiers there that don't speak Pashtun.
Or don't care about the Pashtun.
Yeah, don't give a rat's ass. Yep. So they're, that was one complex 9 months. Holy smokes. There was not 1 second that, there wasn't some, intrigue going on while we're trying to do a fight, while we're trying to collapse, tactical infrastructure, while we're trying to, I think y'all shipped out like 17 40-foot containers of excess equipment left Sparrow and Gar while we're in the fight. While we're trying to push people into the lead that don't want to be in the lead.
Yep. The whole northern, the Uzbek Pashto thing was, I was a private. I keyed into that.
Yeah, it was palatable for sure. Like you definitely got the impression that those dudes didn't give a fuck because it wasn't their home turf. And
Well, the ALP, I remember the first time I had it, when they're like, "Hey, we're going to put ALP in your battle space." And originally the SF, the SOTF commander is like, "Hey, we're going to recruit them. Y'all are going to train them." I'm like, I don't.
No, I'm good.
One, I don't want them.
Yeah.
Two, everyone that you're recruiting, the commander that y'all chose, I'm sure y'all met that fat dude that was on that ALP checkpoint.
What was his name?
I can't remember his name, but he's also the guy that fired an RPG through the side of the 321 Battalion Commander's Striker.
Really?
So I had no trust and faith because he was a Taliban dude.
Yeah, they were all Taliban.
And then all his fighters were from Mazar-e Sharif. None of them were recruited locally. So we had so we had the graduation up at the district center, and the governor, district governor, Haji Muhammad goes out there, and we got the SOTF commander there, CJTF SOTA commander, and the governor goes out there and starts speaking Pashtun to these guys. And he turns around and he's like, "I don't know any of these guys. None of these guys even speak Pashtun, and you want me to graduate these folks?" And I'm like,
operate in Panjwai.
Oh my God. What are we getting ourselves into?
So I think one of the things that I find kind of interesting, and I imagine from the battalion level, it was like you hit the ground running kind of thing. So as soon as we got there, like shit was kicking off. So
it didn't start as fast as I thought it was going to start.
Yeah.
So like that understanding, like the poppies are now being cut.
Yeah.
Right.
Because you remember we had that little brief respite where we were like trying to do some poppy eradication. We're getting the police were taking the USAID provided tractors to go out and then of course they were only doing certain poppy fields that weren't contributing to the larger effort.
Yeah, you can't raise that one, but you can raise that one.
Yeah.
So we had a little brief respite there to try to get, and the goal was get out.
Yeah.
Because I can't remember y'all's battle space, but for some of the battle space, there was okay freedom of movement for a little bit. I mean, it was still IEDs.
It was the same with us.
Yeah, I feel like the first month.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then like when they cut those poppies and they were stacked to the side.
Yeah.
The next day it was on. And of course I had a friend that was a battalion commander that was down in Spin Bulldog, and of course they're watching folks training on the other side of the border, and they're reporting, and then then they're not there.
Wow.
So then they show up in our battle space.
I mean, it was quiet for us until we were the first of our battalion or our company to get into contact, and it was April 25th.
Yeah, so we've been there
About a month.
almost a month, like just shy of a month before things, and even
then it was slow. It was a slow burn.
It was kind of slow burn, but within the month, I say between April and beginning of June, things really accelerated for us around Sparwangar. So I think that was pretty much resonant across the entire battalion. Yeah.
I mean, how soon did the horn clearing operation start to come? Was that something that was planned before you even hit the ground, or was that something that you kind of?
It's something that I started formulating in my mind
when
I was on the PDSS based on seeing the absolute inaction of the folks there before us. Like, we had no breathing space.
Yeah.
Right.
So if we didn't project out, we were just going to sit there and take casualties as we're making a run somewhere for a logistics patrol, or they're going to start lobbing 107s or recoilless rifles into your cops, and people were going to start taking casualties doing that. I wanted. So the task to me was to create it so that Panjwai wasn't basically an ORP for Kandahar.
Right.
There was a lot of fear of projection of spectacular attacks up there, which no one could ever really define.
I was literally about to ask.
Yeah, we do. Yeah. We got Kitching's definition. What's your definition of a spectacular attack?
Anything that creates media-worthy event.
Okay. Media-worthy. Okay. Kitching said anything that makes your jaw drop.
So that's the thing. If you look like larger, as we're in Iraq and we're dealing with like Al Qaeda, that's jaw dropping. They're not going to waste their energy unless it's something that's going to be like spectacular. When I'd have a car bomb go off at the edge of Sadr City and there'd be 274 civilians killed.
Yeah.
Right.
Huge. Surprisingly, sometimes that didn't even make the news for there because that wasn't that significant.
Yeah.
But a well-placed car bomb or an assassination in Kandahar, holy smokes, just the impact of that. But the read was Panjwai, based on the freedom movement that the Taliban and other cats had there, that was basically their assault position to project in there. So it's all, not a lot was being done to prevent that. The units before were taking casualties that weren't because they were taking the fight to them. If we're taking a fight to them, and sometimes we're having casualties, but more people will come home alive or with all their legs because we are taking that fight to them. 1,000% worth it. And
I mean, you kind of notice as the deployment goes on where the casualties happen are further and further away from the base. I mean, our first amputation was 400, 600 yards away from the
small arms range from Sparwangar.
That's no way to fight.
Yeah.
And that was just based on a lesson learned in Sadr City when we went in and we took over like a 123 drove us down in their strikers because in the 82nd we didn't have vehicles. We ended up taking over a mall, and like the next morning we're getting attacked at the wall. Of course, they didn't know that 765 paratroopers went in there in the middle of the night, so death blossom out, kill them all. But creating space, and you can either wait for the fight to come to you on their terms, or you can take the fight to them on their terms. The frustration was that non-metallic and the gray pros and the single file stuff, and then how do I take advantage of the combat power of a platoon when only 3 dudes can actually be in the fight. So we work hard to. I don't know if I know you talked to some of the pilots and all that type of thing, but we accounted for like majority of everything that was going on in RC South at the time. And the G3 Colonel Ziesman up on 3rd ID, or no, he was 82nd, and then when 3rd ID came in, it took a little bit of time to gain the trust of General Abrams. But stuff would stack. Like as soon as y'all would come in contact, like there'd be like F-16s that were up over Ghazni that'd be like, I can be there in 15 minutes. So if the infantrymen couldn't couldn't complete the fight, then we had to have the AHs or the
Right.
OHs or the the Reaper overhead, or if I got to be able to give you the opportunity to employ, like in y'all's battle space, those freaking trees that when
tree lines, man.
I mean, it took a lot to fight just to be able to bring in a flight of B-1s to attack trees.
Right.
Yeah.
But convincing folks how important it is, because I mean, how many times we try to blow up trees in Panjwai with C4 and all that type of thing.
Yeah.
But a tree tied to grape rows with a little bit of high ground and a micro terrain, that becomes like
decimating position.
Holy crap, the importance of that. Even in a company fight. Smokes.
I mean, to be perfectly honest with you, from the infantryman that was out there doing the fight at the time, I didn't appreciate the
tree clearing operation,
the going getting after him. But like in retrospect, obviously, I realized that now that was definitely the right call. But
did y'all get to sit up there when the B-1s came in?
We did, yeah.
It was at Najat, or when they
when they leveled that tree line. Yeah, that was a good run. But I think for us, like, it was an interesting balance because I don't know. It was 10 years ago. I'm a lot more matured now,
sure,
and so I understand the
decision. I don't see any gray in your beard yet.
Yeah, I'm still a young whippersnapper by all means, but I didn't really appreciate some of the movements that we basically we were forced to make, like getting out there, bringing the fight to them, and that kind of thing was tough on your dudes, right? So, what was it like for you to kind of balance that need to get after the enemy, push into their space, get into their home turf with your kind of fighting capacity as a unit?
Yeah, so you got to be able to kind of read. So a lot of it is communicating face to face. Spend a lot of time. I spent no time in Zangabad. Tried to spend as much time as I could getting out to see platoons or company commanders or the SFATs or so I can look somebody in the eye, again, fully trusted Captain Kitching. Mm. But when I go engage him and I could look in his eyes, I could read him, right. Or I went and saw Captain Meyer at Talicon, or Captain Smith or Captain Brown down at Mushan, so I could read them in their eyes, and then tried to, for every single time somebody was gotten in a tough fight, tried to get my ass there, so I could understand what they were dealing with, so I could fight for the right resources. I mean, when the non-metallic IEDs came in, and all we had was that the Mine Hound and the whatever the other one was, I couldn't pick that stuff up, but we knew that the Marines had the Chia 2.0, but the Marines didn't want to give it to RRC, so finally got support from, I can't remember if it was the 82nd or 3rd ID at that time, and we literally loaded the first sergeant from Mushan and a bunch of soldiers to go get the resources, but a lot of that wasn't until I talk with someone and they're like, sir, this thing's a piece of garbage. We need something different, or let me tell you about these Afghans, or you can tell a lot about a person where they're at based on just being able to see their eyes.
Yeah.
So even when I come to Spare One Gar, I'd walk around, I try to talk to folks, but really it was just trying to kind of see people's faces.
Sure.
But it's a tough balance, though, because you can see people and they think they're kind of at their end, but they're not.
Right.
And, you got to balance kind of empathy and not let empathy turn into sympathy.
Sure.
Because I got it. Holy crap, it's a tough fight. But if we don't keep up pressure, I mean, you're going to take more casualties, and that fight is going to come to you.
I think, maybe what I was trying to articulate earlier is I didn't appreciate how getting out there every day was letting me sleep in peace in the schoolhouse. Cause
y'all lucky in that schoolhouse.
Yeah, man. I said it many times on the podcast, but I'll say it on the podcast. But I'll say it again. When we landed, because I was expecting GP mediums and cots.
Mushan. We were expecting Mushan.
We were expecting Mushan, yeah. And when we got off and I looked around, I was like, fuck yeah, like this is nice. I was very pleased with the accommodations. Like we had rep for living conditions in Iraq, like at the end of Iraq that we did in Afghanistan, as Barwangar should say.
Yeah, so I don't know if what I said answers your question.
It does. Yeah, it definitely does.
I mean, it's always a balance because, fighting sucks.
Yeah.
It's fun for about the first 30 seconds.
Yeah. Well, especially when the IED is so ever present. I mean, I'd say if you polled everyone who was on that deployment, if you gave them a choice between gunfights every day or the IED fight, they'd pick gunfights every day.
Yeah.
I can duck my head after the first round. I'd walk down that road. I don't know, man.
Yeah.
It's just, I mean, they call it the leg lottery for a reason. You keep playing it long enough, eventually your number is going to get called, and that's tough.
We end up having 26 amputees.
Oh my gosh.
On the task force, that deployment. Significantly lower than the deployment for the units that were there before. So 26 is still one's too many.
It's a lot.
But y'all's effort and Charlie Company's effort and the pushing out, creating the additional tactical infrastructure and driving roads where, it changed the geometry on the battlefield so that, the IED was still hard.
Yeah.
And they had to change their tactics on IEDs.
To
y'all were getting too good at finding those freaking things.
Yeah.
And y'all's ability to bring in kind of combined and joint fires to complete fights changed the way that they had to fight. And then, their ability to generate non-metallics, and they had to go to the recoilless rifles, try to make to make a difference. I mean, even y'all's, effort around Sparwangar, like, Ranger Regiment would be like, hey, we have a target. We're not sure we have the ability to execute that. Can we hand it off to you? Like, I don't know if y'all did that air assault in between.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, our ability to understand the risks that we're willing to accept in the battle space and the full capacity of the soldiers that made it up. I mean, that was put together like that.
It was the sale. Yeah, I remember that. That was a day of mission.
Yeah.
Watching recoilless rifles get closer and closer, and then like launching the scout platoon into an air assault, and they're literally air assaulting like 2 kilometers out. But anytime they tried to push the space back on us, we had to like immediately find a way to reestablish that buffer. That stuff that y'all kind of help with further down on the Horn when we drove that road kind of from Talican across to Bellambai and into the Zangabad road. So I think y'all's Exo's like truck got blown up, I think, on that one. Yeah. So that's a funny story. I was there with that. In fact, I went down there and like we checked that area and we didn't pick up anything. And I'm like, all right, we're going to drive over it first. So I went down there and drove my Striker around there. That was a hairy time. I had to give like guns to the interpreters. And then y'all come driving up and boom, I'm like, what? I just did everything humanly possible.
Yeah, that was the driver right there.
And then y'all like climb out and I'm like, thank God, everybody's okay.
Are they smoking cigars?
That was interesting because it was just my truck down there trying to secure y'all's egress out of there. And like, holy
smoke. We couldn't get out. We're like, well, I mean.
We're jumping all over the place, but
well, I mean, you mentioned the roads, and that's a question I wanted to ask about. I mean, we learned probably mid-June, like, hey, we can't walk on the roads. It's too high of a risk. But at some point, you want to free up the roads to be used. So how do you balance like the extreme risk of putting a patrol on a road, knowing that there's almost a certainty someone's going to step on something, versus the overall mission is like we have to start using the roads because the locals need to be able to use the road. That frees up trade, that frees up the economy. How did you kind of approach that? I mean,
each area was different. Everyone had some commonalities. Everyone had to deal with grape roads.
Yeah.
Everyone had to deal with the grape huts. Terrain elevations were different in different areas. trail networks were different in different areas in the density. Like when y'all did that stuff down right along the edge of the river when we were doing that push clearing.
Yep.
I mean, that terrain was very different than the terrain that you had, and the ability to be able to move not on that road or on that one trail. So I'll be honest with you. I mean, I rely a lot on the company commanders, and platoon leaders, and the NCOs to you got to feel comfortable and candorous and coming back. And, there's some times where company commanders go, I can't do what you're asking me to do.
Right.
All right. What do I got to give you to be able to do that? I need freaking armored bulldozer. Okay. Well, I'll give you an armored bulldozer. I need a piece of shit robot that that works sometimes and doesn't work other times.
Yeah. Well, it works until it hits an IED.
But you gotta trust your subordinates. That if you're like 0 mils on, they understand. Especially your subordinate directly below, like they understand kind of your commander's intent. Then you got to be able to trust them to come back and go, I understand what you want to do. I can't do that right now, or I need the following, or I can get there, but I'm doing this as opposed to this.
Now, how often did that happen in terms of like your company commanders? How often were they just like, were they? How many times were you told no, it's not going to happen, and how many times where it was kind of a negotiation?
So what you always like, I would challenge folks is like, okay, if you can't do it, but
find a way, kind of thing.
Tell me what you need. Give me a course of action, right? Because the problem doesn't go away.
Yeah.
So if I got to air assault you over and then you're attacking back, or I got to get you, I mean, we had 7 of the 8 armored bulldozers in all of Afghanistan were in Panjwai.
Oh, really?
Are you kidding?
Yeah. When, we got the only M88s in Afghanistan, joint stuff stacked, all over the place, imagery, you name it. Like no one would say no to us. So the challenge to the company commanders and even platoon leaders I interact with them is like, you got to tell me what you need to be able to get after the fight, because the problem set doesn't change.
Right.
But I can help you change the, kind of the math. The more I can make you help you fight unfair, the better.
We don't fight. We don't fight fair.
Yeah.
When you mentioned like all the resources, and we had heard a rumor that a certain percentage of all the ordnance drop in Afghanistan was dropped in Panjwai. What was, how important was Panjwai to the overall, mission RC South and Afghanistan as a whole?
I mean, we were the main effort for the 82nd and 3rd ID based on my conversation with those commanders and deputy commanders. I did struggle, once we started taking casualties and all that type of thing. And like, this was before 3rd ID came in, and General Schweitzer was the DCGO for the 82nd. And he had been my battalion commander when I was a company commander. So I was struggling. I'm like, I have to convince myself that we're making a difference, and that we're achieving something before I can keep asking folks to do this stuff. So,
sure.
He flew in for something up at the Panjwai Center, and like he was getting ready to climb back on the helicopter and fly away. And I had like literally like grab him. I'm like, sir, 30 seconds, convince me that everything that I'm asking these soldiers to do out here is making a difference.
Yeah.
And I can't quote him, but literally in a minute or less, he convinced me that we were making an impact, and that kind of re-galvanized me, because, the challenge with, a lot of people think that like commanders don't feel the loss, or, when soldiers get wounded and that type of thing.
We do.
At every level, people feel the same amount of rage or loss. We suffered a lot.
Yeah.
And, it's a challenge sometimes to be able to have your character sing through the rage, the loss, all that type of thing, to push people to do the right thing. Everyone feels that at every single level. If they don't, they're in the wrong freaking business.
Sure.
That's why I appreciate what y'all are doing with this podcast, because there's a lot of stuff that I still haven't been able to process from that deployment or other deployments, that type of thing. But if you can convince me, what I'm asking my soldiers to do is making a difference. It's the right thing to do. You give me freedom to be able to do it in a way that more people come back alive with all their body parts, then I can convince anybody. I might not convince the private that's doing it, but I can convince the company commander that they're making a difference.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm not going to ask y'all to do anything that me as a battalion commander is not going to do. I can't lead from a talk.
Right.
Yeah.
So holy crap, trying to get out there and have some shared freaking risk, so I can understand the fight.
Well, I mean, I tell you, the one thing that stands out to me is, that the Big Najad operation in October, and we had to get rescued because
Combat.
we were combat
ineffective,
ineffective.
basically.
We had no mine detecting equipment, and we're Vietnam walking down this canal because it's the only way that we can get back to that checkpoint, and to see you there standing at the end of that canal pulling guys out of the water. I mean, it honestly, to me, it was one of the most powerful images of leadership that I had in my entire military career, and it stuck with me to see that you weren't just calling it in, like, "Hey, go get those guys." You were there with us.
Yeah. That was noticeable even at that lowest level. So, we saw what was going on there and deeply appreciated it.
Yeah.
On a lot of levels. So that was good for us. One of the things that we've kind of discovered, I guess, as a result of the podcast, is the kind of unique nature of the fight in Panjwai. Like, not only was it important to RC South in the big picture, but the fight itself was so particular just to that area of Afghanistan that it's hard to, like, not really compare, but like draw commonalities or to see similarities to other areas. So when when we got there and we started getting out there and getting after it, like, how much of the uniqueness of that fight were you expecting in terms of the IEDs, the way that small arms worked, the way the enemy worked versus your previous experience, and or what actually happened on the ground when we started getting out there?
The potential for like catastrophic violence in Panjwai was higher than places I'd been, because it's very easy to compartmentalize fights, to isolate a platoon.
Yeah.
Like if the Taliban had their crap together, they could have been much more effective. I mean, potential for violence in Sadr City deployment, when we'd do a raid and the next day Jay Shalmati would come out with 1 million folks in their black pajamas and walk down the main street. They're showing us, hey, you're 765 paratroopers, this is what we could do if we wanted to. But the actual, like, potential for, the violence that we experienced, the kind of uniqueness of the fight, I don't think anything in, like, Iraq that I experienced or other deployments I experienced prepared me for that, other than we weren't going to fight on their terms. And again, seeing the units before, fighting on their terms. We weren't going to do that. Probably doesn't answer your question. But.
No, it does.
It does in a way, yeah.
No, it's fine. I mean, you mentioned how unique we had to fight there. When I think a lot of units, especially the one that replaced us when they came in, they were like, we are going to send a full platoon out every time. We're going to bound. We're going to use heavy weapon squads. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. We're going to take back the roads. And we're like, okay, but have an open mind. Because it's, one thing that we've really come away with is talking to all the eras of combat in Panjwai. as far as we can tell, we were one of the few units that was doing squad size operations, either by necessity because we didn't have enough people, or just because we were more adaptable. Was that a common thing for the company commanders to change the way that they maneuvered in the space?
I mean, that was always the challenge of, like I think I linked in with every single company commander, of course nightly, but like face to face twice a week, at least. And if they were in a fight, definitely I was linking up, or if I could like vector in and, link in with Kitching sitting next to a wall or something like that.
Right.
But that's what I put on them constantly is, all right, how do you read your space? What are we doing? What are they doing? What do you got to do different?
Right.
And so I try to challenge them on how are we going to change? How are we going to adapt? And not really adapt, force them to adapt to us.
Sure.
Don't let them dictate the fight. Because my experience in Iraq, a lot of times we reacted to them and we were one step behind. They would bring a new TTP or tactic and then we would react. And they'd bring another one and we'd react. The goal was to, hey, let us change. Let them react to us. Kind of hard to do when you're fighting for, yards on a trail.
Yeah.
We started to figure out I think we've talked about it on the podcast a few times. It was probably in the latter half, like, hey, we need to leave at night. We need to be there on our objective right before the sun comes up. And then as soon as if we can, we need to occupy a compound and make them come to us. Because, if they ambush us, we're at a disadvantage for a few seconds.
We tried to do all sorts of things. So, remember those flying trash cans?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
How loud those things were?
Yeah.
Super stealthy.
Yeah, where's the Taliban sleeping? All right, go just make that thing hover until we got to bring it back. And it just stays above them, all night long to, hey, we want them to think that the Canadian tanks are back. So getting those piece of junk MGSs, and in the middle of the night driving an MGS with an 88 that we kept hidden, down to like Cop Line and having the 88 do donuts while the
trash cans are flying.
Well, the trash cans are flying and the MGS is like pounding 105 rounds out. On the chatter, they're like, are the tanks back of this? And that allows us to like start targeting some folks that we didn't know. You always try to be innovative, but sometimes you can't be. You got to be kind of evolutionary as opposed to revolutionary, and how you figure that out.
So I think on the ground level, in a lot of ways, like we saw, especially in hindsight, we saw how the fight evolved over the 9 months that we were there. But I feel like they always had the drop on us, like in terms of the act. When it comes down just to the day-to-day firefights, we never got the drop on them. So it's interesting to see how you talk about how we changed the way that they fight by pushing out there. But from that level, it was like they're always dropping the hammer on us. So, but I'm imagining that from your perspective, you're seeing that the way that we're actually bringing it down on them, in a way.
Yeah, if you're the point man, it's always going to be a different perspective.
Yeah.
And like we talk a bunch of times, like we can all be looking at the exact same objective, but you're on this mountain, I'm on this hilltop, you're in a Apache, we're all looking at the same thing, but we'd all describe it completely differently, even though we're looking at the same thing.
Yeah.
So tactically, can we change that when it's, contact's always going to be made by the front dude.
Yeah.
How are we prepared? Like as soon as they make contact, what can we bring to bear?
That was one thing that once the contact was initiated, we brought the hate. Like that was not a problem for us, but it's interesting to get that perspective because, I don't know. For me, it's this balance all the time of the day-to-day grind with the big picture, and it's a hard balance for me on that small E4, throwing Gustav rounds kind of mentality. It was hard to see that while I was there. So I appreciate the kind of refreshing oversight of everything, and it even now 10 years later, it's bringing a level of understanding that I wouldn't have appreciated at the time or didn't have the wherewithal to fully conceptualize, if you will.
Well, as I looked at all the companies, making sure they understood kind of purpose and intent. For y'all, was pretty easy. I think that discussion between myself and Captain Kitching, for the folks out at Mushan, it was pretty easy. For Taliban, it was a little bit more difficult because their fight was a little less defined. For Charlie Company that was at Zangabad, holy crap, trying to help them understand the why, totally different fight than even y'all just 9 kilometers over that way. And then for Cyclones down at Kenjikak, totally different fight, totally different purpose. So a lot of the Army at that time kind of delineated targeting between kinetic targeting and non-kinetic targeting. What we quickly realized in Panjwai is we couldn't do any of that. Divorced of each other. So we created this thing. I can't remember it was how we were going to synergize or synchronize the kinetic and non-kinetic targeting for the effects that we wanted to achieve. I wish I could remember the name of like all the staffs in your company leadership all called it the amoeba. And they had a pretty cool, what the letters of amoeba meant, but, Each one of y'all's fights was so uniquely different that there was no cookie cutter solution to each one. So being able to get there and see and talk and having First Sergeant Cullum standing over a map saying, "Here, this is how the platoon sergeants read it." To have is it Ballard? I think was the First Sergeant for Cyclone Company. I think that him laying out what that strange fight out there looked like. It was clear, at least in my mind, between myself and company level, it's always going to be hard to deliver a why down to the folks that are at the tip. And communicating kind of the value of what they're doing. It's always going to be a challenge down to the lowest level because that's not the glorious part.
Well, I think it takes time. It's taken me 10 years to kind of come to terms with what we did, why it was special, why it was different. For a lot of guys, I'm sure it was the case in 1, 2, 3 as well. It's their first and only deployment that they ever had. Real deployment, like combat, battle space ownership. It's hard to reckon with that. You can't see it probably even at the platoon light leader level. You can't see beyond the grape row. You can't see beyond the grape hut. This project is really what's kind of helped me understand our role in the whole thing. And then, watching what happened in August, tough to reckon with that.
Wasn't a surprise.
No surprise to anybody. Yeah. That's something we talked a lot about. It's like talking about the multiple layers of perspective. Like any E4 that walked out of Afghanistan could have told you what was going to happen back in August.
Yeah. That's why all the interpreters that I could like in 2013, I'm like, come on. You're getting out. Let's go.
Yeah.
Of course, they were all back over as interpreters, but now U.S. national ones, Cat 2 type folks. But hindsight's always 20/20. How you process things is different for every single person. So I make sure that the experience and everything I learned from it and everything that y'all communicate and all that type of thing isn't a waste either. Like I described to you earlier. I got. We got 4,460 something cadets. So every story of, a Luxmore, a Schiller, a Navarro, all that leads to a learning event that can be applied here so that, our leaders of tomorrow are better prepared than we were to be able to deal with tough fight,
Well, like you said, they're not all going to be the same. How many different combat deployments you've been on, and each one is different. And each one is hard in their own way. And you can train Battle Drill 1 Alpha for 6 years, and then you show up in Panjwai and you can't run it. It's just.
Or you go to Iraq, and one day you're in Mosul, and then you got sent down to to Baghdad, and then you get sent down to Mustafa or whatever the case may be. Your fight can change pretty quick.
What do you think from from a leadership perspective, like what was your biggest kind of takeaway from Panjwai?
Standards matter.
Standards matter.
We had the bell and buy. You had 5-2 with the murder squads. You had the investigations into snipers, and and for me that was just I know it drove y'all probably didn't feel it, but trust me, your platoon sergeants and your platoon leaders felt it. Like I wanted to read people's faces, but I could also come up and look at iPro. I could come up and look at anything. Is anything changing? Now, there's some stuff on the periphery. All right, you're cuffing your sleeves. I got it. I don't care about that.
I'm glad you say that.
Yeah,
I do care about that. But if it progresses, past that, then
right.
Some discipline matters, and the trust is given faster when you do the small things right. So you want freedom as a small unit commander. You show that you can you do the small things right. That was a challenge with some of the ODAs. Good people, but in my opinion, not the right amount of oversight, not the right amount of discipline. So when we did put our arms around them and say, hey, we're going to do this clearing operation, and we're expecting you to come in behind and establish this relation, so you can actually do your mission as opposed to, sitting on your rowing machines and, we can create some synergy. I don't know, I'm babbling. So
No, that leads into a really good question. But what was the relationship like? I mean, obviously you had a lot of attachments. You had engineers, and we also had enablers that weren't directly under your control, like the military working dogs, EOD, and the ODAs. So how was it like? Shifting.
The EOD was. And the dog handlers were, and the female engagement teams that we get, all that stuff was, but the ODAs weren't. So that was always the challenge when trying to balance. So much capability and capacity, but if it's not synchronized with the battle space owners.
Right.
But reaching out specifically on the ODA side, tons of capability, but there was no clear linkage to us.
Right.
Thus, we'd be like, hey, don't build a checkpoint there. And then we say, and then they're like, hey, we want you to secure it. And we're like, well, we don't have the combat power to secure it. And then, then when the PL walks in there and, gets his legs blown off, you're like, or the ODA, team leader goes in there, or, your commander did a good job, so did the others on communicate day. Don't use this trail, or, you are going to have a challenge. Rangers would listen. The ODAs would be like, y'all don't know. And then they'd walk down the trail and somebody would get hurt, and they'd be like so frustrated. But working with the SOTF South commander, and he had a really good Siege SOTF A commander and Colonel Fletcher at the time. So, our ability to communicate and create synergy developed throughout the deployment. And I would like to think it was better because of that for future times. But it was frustrating up front.
I think that was another thing for us on that smaller level, was like the lessons learned, man. It was an accumulation. Like, we felt like we weren't really super effective in the fight until like the last 2-3 months, because it took like 6-7 months to really figure it out, like on the tactical level, kind of figuring out how to do it. So it was the same on the big picture. Did it feel that way, or was it?
No.
Yeah.
No.
Cool.
It was like, again, every company was different.
Yeah.
And then, one company would take off to go to Maywan or Zari, and then another company would come in. We just came from the Argandab. We know what a tough fight is. And then next thing you know, they'd be like, we're pinned down.
Just so diverse and so ranged.
There was no one fight in Panjwai.
No.
Yeah. Even on the tactical level around Spur Guard, there was no one fight. It evolved and changed all the time, which I guess that's the nature of warfare to an extent. When you're actively combating the enemies, things are always changing.
Vote too, right?
Well, and each one of y'all, based on kind of the amount of fights and contact, everyone kind of developed at different paces. Because some people went for a while without a lot going on. Other folks, it was like every day.
Yeah.
I'm in a fight and somebody's getting wounded or somebody's getting killed, or, those elements learned incredibly fast.
Right.
And then reading y'all, that's why we started hey, we're doing this for 9 months. There's no environmental morale leave. I want y'all to feel special. That's why I put y'all in those boonie caps, which drove everyone nuts. But who else in the RC South was doing that?
Zero.
Yeah.
None. So when y'all showed up at, when I sent you back for those 48-hour refits every 45 days to get you, people y'all probably didn't sense it, but people was like, "Hey, that's 1, 2, 3. That's
really?
the guys from."
Well, as a pasty ass white dude, I appreciate the boonie caps for sure.
I think it was General Abrams like, "Why are you wearing booty caps?" I'm like, "Well, sir, one, to make them feel special. Two, I'm helping, so the Army doesn't have to pay for cancer treatment." But the real thing was, how do I make y'all feel different from everyone else that had a different fight?
Yeah.
And if you went back there on those refits, which I hopefully you got to do a few times. I mean, but the folks in the boonie caps carried themselves differently.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to, they always had their weapon when they could. They weren't going to let that go.
They weren't low crawling when the air attack sirens were going
Siren
off.
goes off and you're like, come on. But, I know it's a small thing, but I'm like, how do I make these people feel different? Because they are different.
That's interesting.
The details matter, that little details. I still have my booty cap. I don't know where my fucking PC is, but I have my booty cap.
Yeah. Still with the PFC rank, got it.
Yeah. my size 8, huge ass, gigantic head. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned General Abrams. And he came in, probably August?
Yeah, about halfway.
Halfway through.
Yeah. What was it like for when him and 3rd ID came in and kind of took over RC South? How did that affect our operations, other than the fact that he loved us at Spurman Guard?
Well, yeah, he loved Bayonet Company.
Yeah.
I knew that. I knew that from the beginning, and I think that was y'all's physical fitness level or something like that. No, it's just the transfer of trust. So I'd work with General Huggins when I was a company commander. He was my brigade commander, and his deputy commander for operations was my battalion commander. So I had a very close relationship and the trust on collateral damage assessments. Where I was allowed to strike anything.
Right.
Whereas all the other battalions had to go through all this clearance process, and so I had a lot of freedom. So we had to earn the trust of the folks coming in with 3rd ID. And so I appreciate, General Abrams had some frank conversations, and he invested the time to come out and understand what was going on. So at least in my mind, the trust transferred pretty quickly where we really didn't feel, for a brief, there was a slowdown to get to the trust level, but quickly as we proved that we would do the right thing, and as we did the air assaults or we did the strikes or we did the we quickly maintained the exact same freedom that at least from talking to all my peers and battalions around us, they did not experience the same.
And it even felt to us that when Abrams took command, the gloves were taken off a little bit more. We felt like we got a little bit more. And
y'all got more white milk and stuff like that. I don't.
It felt easier to get bombs dropped, at least for us.
From our perspective.
From our perspective, it felt that way.
Of course, there was much more interest in, 164. Because y'all are part of
3rd ID.
3rd ID. Yeah. That's kind of the reason I think we got remissioned from being the SOT of North and doing the VSO thing to being a battle space owner, because you got a striker brigade coming out of Fort Lewis going to work for the 82nd with none of the battalion commanders having worked there before, but the division commander used to be brigade commander. So there's some inherent trust and all that type of stuff so that's kind of, and at least in my uninformed mind, that's kind of why we got remission to go back down there. But no, I didn't feel any. Like I said, there might have been a little pause to confirm, just like on that. It's like on that day that y'all did the Najat thing, and literally, I'm getting the reports on what's going on, and like General Abrams is coming in strikers with some doctor that wants to understand how we're doing the fight in Panjwai, which is different. So literally I had to tell like the XO, hey, you got this. I'm zooming past his strikers that he's coming in on. I think he's coming in on a bridge. I'm like, hey, put Martin 6 on the net. Hey, sir, I'm not going to be there. Bayonet's in a tough fight right now, and that's where I got to be. And he's like, Roger. So I appreciate that. There's a lot of folks that'll be like, hey, I got somebody really high that's coming in.
Right.
So I got to go, be there for y'all's thing and talk to the platoon leader and those folks and hopefully make a difference. And then I had to go right back over and walk into a meeting with General Abrams and Dr. whoever to talk about larger things when really I'd rather have stayed at Najat.
I think one of the continuities that I'm seeing in our conversation is like trust. So like now that you're, well into your career and you're kind of hanging out here at West Point, like how do you evaluate trust in that day-to-day basis with the guys that are under you, like in any kind of command capacity? Like you're getting that read on a dude. How much of that trust are you willing to invest right off the bat? And how much of that are you kind of holding in reserve until that you see where their standard is at and where they're kind of meeting you?
There's different types of trust.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's something that we talk a lot about here. We got junior leaders and they're like, hey, my commander's going to have to earn my trust. I'm like, that's a tough position to start from.
Yeah.
So if I'm working for somebody, you're my boss, like you have my trust until it's yours to lose. It's a little bit different in superior down the subordinate.
Right.
So I got to very clearly communicate kind of expectations and kind of red lines and all that type of thing. And hey, here's some non-negotiable type standards. And that's why, for me, that's the easiest thing on, hey, can they do the small things right? If they got, then I got it. They're gonna be able to get after some larger things with complete trust. And the other thing is just through iterations and getting reps.
Yeah.
I build trust with the fire support officer that's supporting you, or, this platoon leader is calm, cool, and collected in a firefight. Whereas this one, because, my striker, I have like 12 nets and I'm eavesdropping on everything. And this guy is like losing it, out of control. So there's a tertiary, I don't know if that's the right word for it, kind of trust on, I trust that you're going to do the right thing, but the impact that you're going to have your soldiers around you is different. So,
even like on the lower level, like there's different levels of trust.
Yeah.
Like there were people in combat I would trust with my life that I wouldn't trust with my car keys.
Yeah.
The guy that you trust on patrol may not be the guy you trust to get you home safe in Savannah.
Yeah.
And that always stuck out to me, the kind of like the dichotomy of personalities in combat that, there's just some guys that have it. They have it. They're just like born with it. They're calm under fire, like you're saying, and then there's some that just don't. And it doesn't always translate into like your actual character. Some guys that I fought with, the hardest warriors I've ever fought with, I'm like, man, like you get back home and it's just like, where's that warrior? Where's that outstanding person? And it obviously you can go both ways too. You can have an outstanding person that just isn't meant to perform under fire.
I tried to lift. You probably didn't read it. That card that I handed out to everyone, right? That Tomahawk's red line card. All right, that was, y'all probably read it once, and then it, if that, I know I tried to brief it to everybody.
Yeah.
Watching what happened in Bellenby, watching the bad things that happened in Arghandab and all that, watching some bad stuff happen in Afghanistan or in Iraq, other deployments around. If you're clear on what the expectations are, like, and sometimes it's just as broad as I expect you to do the right thing, right? I expect you to be honest, even if it's an ugly baby that you're throwing on the table. If it brings absolute discredit to everything that Task Force Tomahawk is doing, I want you to be honest. It's like that. And I use it in some of the stuff that I discuss with future leaders here is, like the last part of it. again, y'all, I know you don't remember it, but it was like, it is your duty that if you see something that is wrong and you see it as wrong and like no one does anything about it, I mean, it's your duty to take it to the next level, to inform me, to do whatever. The litmus test is what you're doing. Do you want your parents to read about it on the front page of the New York Times? Yeah, that probably doesn't resonate for an E3 or an E4. But if I can get it to resonate with some NCOs and platoon leaders, then I trust that I'm not going to have, people going off the reservation. It's much stronger. I don't know.
I mean, even another degree of trust. I mean, so you come into the AO and you have aviation support. And, as a pilot, I can tell you that aviation support varies in quality from unit to unit to unit, especially when you're dealing in a situation where like most of your targets are within the danger close range. How did you kind of evaluate whether you could trust those pilots to
well,
make
the first thing I
those
did is
facts?
I went out there and I hopped in a helicopter with the task force commander. And I went out and flew a day of missions.
Okay.
To go, holy crap, y'all can't see anything.
Yeah.
And then we invest a lot of time go sitting with the aviation task force there at Kandahar on the airfield. So I went in and tried to make sure that all the pilots understood the impact, whether they were Black Hawk pilots that are flying resupply or the shit hooks flying low cost, low altitude resupply, or the Apache guys, or whatever the case may be, the impact that they make, for the fight that we have on it. Because I go out there and like coin the crap out of folks. We created, what we called go safe zones, and so we created the NAIs and the TAIs so that there was more of a chance that they would actually be able to have an effective strike, whether it be guns or rockets or missiles. We invest a lot of effort in trying to develop a relationship with them and getting them the AAR y'all's contacts, like how they can be more effective. I mean, because a lot of cases, that's what we're talking about. You're only fighting with one dude that's at the front of the line. Right. So if you can't bring to bear, some sort of combined or joint fires, quickly, we're not. Yeah, they are fighting on their terms.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like, and that's one area where we loved our air assets. Obviously, every 11 Bravo loves his Kiowas and Apaches, but that was an area where I feel like that was a pretty tightly compacted little resource that we utilized. Like we were pretty shit hot in terms of getting air in Panjwai and getting it pretty effective. Like we used it a lot.
They would, as soon as we got in large fight, I mean, stuff would just start stacking.
Yeah.
And for the Air Force, it was awesome. For the for our CCA, whether it's Apaches or whatever we were flying, it was pretty good. Awesome, actually. Yeah, we had some challenges with some of our Navy pilots, especially out around Mushan, where they're like, "Oops, just had a bomb come off the rail." Like what? Or some of our
it's a hell of an oops.
We tried to employ some Excaliburs, out in western Panjwai, and like they'd shoot it, and they'd be like, "Hey, round unobserved." Or
where were those rounds coming from?
They come from Soja.
Oh, that's what I was wondering. Because they were.
What's an Excalibur?
It's like a guided artillery round.
Precision guided 155 round.
Okay.
Or the smoke missions when we'd ask y'all to like cross something and the smoke would impact and detonate like 10 meters underground.
Yeah. Or it would land on a coochie hut and burn up something little grandma. Yeah, that happened.
So, I mean, we went more to relying on our organic capabilities for some of those things. Not for lack of trying and, the artillery guys trying to fix their stuff. But.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it stands out to me. I mean, the Canadians loved their artillery, and they had 155s on Spur One Gar.
Yeah.
And it just never seemed to be a big part of our fight.
Well, we didn't get a lot of pushback because a lot of pushback from like the Afghan locals because, I mean, how many CivCas do you think there was?
Yeah.
We had some.
Maybe a dozen that I could.
Yeah, I mean, if that.
Yeah.
And
I think most of that was on the clearing the horn mission.
Yeah, and a lot of that would be, I mean, you got an AK-47 round that, went through you. none of my soldiers have
AK-47.
And they're like, well, your Afghan National Army that was with you. I'm like, they were like a kilometer behind. So, but we built some trust, and like sitting up in the district governor, I'd be like watching some Taliban leader. He's riding, and he's like, strike him, strike him, strike him. And I'm like, I can't, because you see all those kids and that family that's right there.
Right.
And he'd be like, you don't want to kill that guy? I'm like, yeah, I want to kill that guy, but I'm not at the expense of all those other folks. What's the purpose doing here? So it was interesting, kind of the WASTA that you built with them, going, holy smokes, like you actually do care,
right?
I'm like, yes. Of course, they communicate to all the other leaders. So, like, we never saw any of that snap back on CivCas because we had very few incidents of that. And if we did, holy crap, we were on it.
Yeah. And that was considering how kinetic the fight was. It was a kind of an interesting. It's a miracle, really, that there wasn't more to some extent. But I mean, like especially like compared like Iraq, where that was a big problem. We were fortunate to not have to do that, like not have to be the enemy in a way in that regard.
I think I was telling you, like probably the most risky one was like when I rolled into Sparrow and y'all were like being attacked from that little village that was right outside,
blossoming the whole area.
And there's people running around in their underwear, trying to defend. So I roll up in my striker, and I'm like, I see a dude, and I'm just pounding the heck out of him, trying to with the 50 cal on the striker, and first sergeant column comes around. It's like, cease fire, and I'm like, what? And he's like, oh, sir, you continue firing. And I'm like, oh, thanks, man.
Thanks for the permission.
Do you really not want the 50 helping out right now? Bayonet Company, all the companies were blessed with some. We had a lot of the right folks, or the folks that had the right capacity. Some rock stars, some folks that weren't rock stars. I wasn't a rock star, but had what we needed to get everybody through that fight.
We feel fortunate. I mean, at the time, there was days where I wanted to fucking kill him. But in retrospect, hindsight's 2020. I feel fortunate now to have like Brian Kitching as our company commander. Like he was a hell of a commander. That's an important leadership thing too. I think to learn is like when to give your guys somebody to hate. Like sometimes that's got to be the case. Like even this morning at Starbucks, you're kind of busting some cadet's balls over a haircut.
That was a major. So
was it? Oh, okay. He looked super young. I don't know. But yeah, that was kind of funny. It's like you got to give somebody, not hate's a strong word, but you got to have that point of agitation as a leader as well. Like that's something you got to absorb in a way.
Yeah, if it binds the subunits, closer together and all that type of thing, I'll carry some dislike on my shoulders. I don't care.
Right.
I'm as a leader, you're not trying to win a popularity contest, and if you are, you're
probably
doing the wrong thing.
Yeah.
That's here trying to develop leaders of the future. So focus on basic blocking and tackling.
Yeah.
If you do the small things right, oh my God, the chances you got. I mean, yeah.
What's the cadet culture like around here? And we don't have. You can be. We can edit it out if you don't want to. You say what you actually feel, and then we can.
Well, because like I direct a lot of cadets to check out y'all's thing, especially the new lieutenant episode for them to kind of how folks process things. You got all the right people. So like on my ceiling, I got this. There's like mosaic somebody put up before, and it's like Patton and Eisenhower and MacArthur and Grant and Lee, and it says the Corps has, which means the Corps has gone to crap. So I'm in a daily fight with like old grads to understand that no, it hasn't.
Yeah,
like we have our country's best come here, and they all want to contribute. They all want to make a difference. It's just different now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
yeah.
That's why it's important to capture lessons learned from Panjwai or whatever the case may be. Because what I tell the cadets is, you are more inspirational than the 4-star generals that we bring here to talk to them. not that they're not inspirational, but it's for a different reason. Your experience, being an infantryman and a pilot in multiple deployments is more inspirational than a lot of the stuff that we are able to expose them to. So, being able to bring stories that resonates with cadets, but we got to bring more recent stuff, so like, we can only read so many books about Korean War.
Right.
We've had a lot more recent stuff, and I think all that stuff's going to come out, and some of it has started coming out, but, to pull them into, modern times, and give kind of sense, purpose, and direction. Like I told you, I deal with the brigade staff, and it's like Rhodes Scholar, Marshall Scholar,
right?
Like incredibly smart young leaders that are going to have a huge impact in the Army. We just got to give them kind of a aim point,
right,
to move towards. So,
well, I know just kind of through the course of doing this project, our goal from the beginning was we didn't just want to tell war stories. We wanted to convey the experience for what it was like for that, that new lieutenant, or for that point man, or for that pilot, or for a battalion commander. Because, like you said, I mean, there's how many books about the Korean War, how many books about the Vietnam War. When you think about all the books that have been written about the war on terror, it's a lot of war stories. It's, this is what it was like in the Korengal, or this is what it was like Operation Anaconda, and the invasion, horse soldiers, that kind of thing. And I really do hope that more people do what we've done, which is look into what their experience is and what they meant.
Well, it's a linkage afterwards too, and that's kind of, if I look at something that I probably failed at was, try to maintain contact with like wounded and Gold Star families, and at a certain point you got to kind of wean that relationship off, so that people can move forward.
Right. But
we have a lot of folks that get stuck.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes time to process. I shared some stuff from some Tomahawk, other Tomahawk soldiers on some of their perspectives. Dudes are struggling.
Yes.
That's why I told you, like, y'all doing this it's helpful for me to process some stuff, because as much as I want to understand the fight from your point of view, it's hard.
Yeah,
hard to do. Even if I walk in your shoes, or I'm walking 3 people back on a patrol, it's still different. And like I didn't get a chance to start processing anything until like we rotated back to CAF to get ready to redeploy. And even then,
you're not home.
Still,
your brain's not off until you're.
Then I come back, I give up command, I become a G3 for a division.
Right.
I'm focused on trying to do that, and I still don't get a chance to really process that. And then, off to Somalia for a year, and then brigade command, and then deploy, and so when I saw y'all stuff, that's really when I started kind of being able to think through stuff, because I had stuff compartmentalized from every single deployment and every single everything.
Yeah.
All right, it's time to start unpacking some of that stuff.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it's the right time.
It is.
The war's done for all intents and purposes, and it's been a long enough period of time now that we can fully flesh out certain things, and it's the timing for us has been, and I really appreciate you saying that, because that just reinforces that the timing was right for us to partake on this. But I mean, one of the things about projects like this, and I hope that more and more stuff like this starts to come out, is we're going to have a generation of leaders that's going to have a more experiential, firsthand exposure to combat and warfare that it's not really existed in a way from previous conflicts, like. And unless you're getting it from the horse's mouth, but like the media or the knowledge that they can kind of consume is going to be conveyed in just kind of a different way, and that the experience is what's going to come first. At least I hope.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong in that, but the experience will come first, and then the tactics and the strategy and all that be reinforced by that instead of the other way around. Does that make any sense?
No, it does. Yeah. Kind of like, you can read like a World War II history book, and you know that this ship was here and this ship was here, and the planes flew in from here. But I really, and we're definitely not the only ones doing it. Memories of the Korengal is a really good Instagram page, and he has a book, and he's talked about his experiences in the Korengal from, like I said, from an experiential perspective. And I think it's important. And I hope, the sad thing is, 20 years on, how many of those leaders and how many of those experienced guys have decided to not stay in.
As long as we capture it. I mean,
as long as we capture it.
It's like, I graduated in 93. The first time I saw combat was 2003. Mm-hmm. So my first 10 years in the Army were training your ass off. And a lot of times you're like, hey, this 7-8, and it says this is what you do. Or 7-7 Juliet. I don't know why that's why we do it the way we do it, but I'm going to train my ass off to be able to do that. And with our more connected social media, all that type of thing, why is coming a little bit more important for some things now. And like I tell the cadets, sometimes I can't explain why. Sometimes you got to trust me and shut up and color.
Yes.
For the West Point experience, for example, or someone going through basic training or, AIT, a lot of times they're never going to understand the why until they get further and further away from that experience. And then there'll be something that will, trigger in their head. Okay, now I understand.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe if this next generation of military leaders and just Joes and stuff like that too, maybe they'll have a deeper understanding of the why. Because like even when I joined in 2008, it was very much like just shut the fuck up and do your job kind of thing. And it's good to get that why, because it opens your mind a little bit to what's going on around you. So yeah, I mean, to me, that was the why behind stuff, and the not seeing the why was what frustrated me so much of being in the military. So I think in the long term, it's probably going to be a healthier, more beneficial thing to the military culture in general to have that why be at the forefront of the conversation.
Yeah. It's good to pat on the conflict too.
Yeah.
We're talking about if we're throwing a battalion at the Korean border, we just got to do it.
Yeah.
There's not going to be time to ask why.
Yeah.
But
if you're defending Europe from Russian invasion,
sometimes having a name point kind of creates focus and purpose. And that's a challenge for folks today. Is how do I focus the purpose of my unit? Is it just to go to NTC?
Been talking about.
So I think we've taken a little bit of a tangent, but we can bring it back to Panjwai.
Yeah, we'll bring it back to Panjwai a little bit.
Yeah.
You were talking about some of the, obviously your relationship with Karzai's brother, who is, I think he's from Panjwai, or he's...
their family is from Panjwai.
Yeah. What was kind of like the local dynamic? Because that's not something we really got, like the local politics and how we kind of played into that whole situation.
Yeah.
The rabbit hole.
Yeah, that was a kind of an interesting thing. Just understanding like who's truly the power brokers,
Right.
So the government of Afghanistan's level of influence depended on what sticks and carrots they had, really.
Right.
So if you do it like at face value, there's of course district governors, and then there's the different tribal leaders, and depending on the linkage to the governor and whether or not the governor was actually from the province or the district that he was governing, it was different in every single area on the level of influence they had. For Panjwai, I think the limit of their ability to govern kind of ended at the front gate of the district center, maybe extended into the market a little bit. But the real power brokers are what they call the Khans, who are the folks that actually own the land. Okay. So like all those folks that lived in Panjwai, none of them owned any of that land.
Right, I remember hearing that.
And they didn't get to choose what they farmed. So, if the Khan said, hey, you're going to grow poppy, they grew poppy. If the Khan said you're going to grow marijuana, you're going to grow marijuana. If you're going to grow, corn, whatever it was, they were the ones that dictated all that type of stuff. But the relationship between like the district governor and the provincial governor, it really came down to what their tribal and familial type connections were. Did y'all ever meet the AUP commander for Panjwai?
Xanadine? No, that was ALP.
That was that ALP.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can talk about that dude.
Dean always trying to proposition privates to come.
I mean, that's where you saw the different folks trying to garner favor or ability to gain personal riches. Like when y'all drive out, you'd see the old district center, and then there was the police station.
Right.
And right next to it was the ODA compound. Then you saw the construction. That was right next to it, which was a police station being built by USAID. And then there was another construction right next to it, and that was a police station being built by Garoa. And then across the street, there was another construction, and that was I can't remember the organization, but they were building a police station also, all based on whether district governor asked for it or the provincial governor or Razik or, there were so many informal leaders all over the place. And because of the importance of Panjwai being the kind of the birthplace of the Taliban, like they broke it apart. Like Zari to our north, I mean,
it used to be Panjwai.
Used to be part of that district. And the hierarchy, like if I went to a larger meeting, when the Panjwai district governor would walk in, I'm not sure where he derived his kind of wasta when we do the different shuras and that type of thing. But I mean, Haji Muhammad, that dude carried a lot of weight. And then you have kind of the older folks, like I mentioned, the Khans, a majority of whom don't live in Afghanistan.
Where are they? Mostly in Pakistan, or
no? They're mostly in UAE.
Really?
So talking with Qayyum, he was able to get some of the Khans to come in, and we could have a talk about expectations and what they'd be willing to deliver if we're successful during that fighting season. So if we could actually drive out the Pakistani Taliban, the Pakistani trained Afghan Taliban, foreign fighters, all that type of thing, then, they were like, hey, we would support a popular uprising, which like weeks after we left, suddenly I'm getting reports from, Colonel Dugan, who replaced us in Zangabad, and the other battalion commander out to the east, that are like, holy crap, peace is broken out in Panjwai. And Panjwai, that the next fighting season went from accounting for 80% of the SIGACs in RC South to like none.
Right.
So did we have good effect based on the kinetic stuff and the non-kinetic stuff and kind of agreements made in the background? Yeah. I mean, we gave them the opportunity to realize something more than what they had beforehand.
That relationship with the Khans not even being in the country.
Yeah, that's surprising to me.
That really blows my mind. Yeah. So they're just landowners, and there's a war being fought on their land.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, I don't know, it's weird to me to not be there.
Yeah.
Wow. I had no idea.
I think the politics thing is just bizarre in that, in that part of the world, that there's so much going on, and I feel like we can be a little down our nose at them. We just show up and it's mud huts, so we just assume it's all Stone Age shit. But you got some dude living in some high rise in the UAE who owns however many acres of poppy in Panjwai, who's probably worth millions of dollars because of the.
Well, it's a challenge getting folks, especially kind of on the Department of State and USAID, understanding of the dynamics that existed there. So,
yeah,
like you remember when they held like where they're going to train females on how to raise chickens. All right. So there was this initiative that came in the Panjwai, and they're like, hey, this is Department of State folks. Hey, we want to train females to be able to raise chickens. And I'm like, that's not going to fly.
There's no way.
Like, we can't do that. And they're like, well, you need to figure out how to get them to support women's rights. And I'm like, all right, we're already fighting the Taliban. If we do this type of thing, it could lead to like the people I work with daily,
right,
like doing bad things. So we said, no, absolutely not. You can't do this.
Right.
Well, they did do it. And brought in, a number of ladies from the Najat area and some other areas to learn how to raise chickens. And, we had told them that even our good Afghans would draw and quarter them. So what do you think happened? So you trained them how to raise chickens. They left the district center after learning how to raise chickens, and all of them were killed. And not by Taliban.
Right.
So, it was a challenge always trying to, we try to get people to buy into some American values and all that, but some we're never going to get to fit.
Yeah. I mean, you got to take baby steps. You can't go.
Yeah. I mean, some things, like even something as seemingly minuscule as training somebody, it's like basic domestic housekeeping things. Like that's it's kind of an impossible feat in a lot of ways, like to fully expect that area. And I think maybe that's where, like, big picture Afghanistan, the deterioration happened on that local level where nobody at any kind of, it seemed, when it came bigger, like higher level leadership, not a lot of people understood just the stark reality of that, outside of the military, inside the military. So, I mean, that had to have been a challenge for you to kind of be kicking your feet against the wall in frustration that, they're trying to pull stuff like that. And like, it's just not going to work. Like, how did you make that? Was there any way that you found a way, like, really convey how certain things just ain't going to work no matter how much time and money and effort? And
there's always a campaign plan, right? That's out there. And you got like aim point 32.5 that, by this date, this is going to be happening in the battle space. So as a battalion commander, the most you can do is say, there's no way we're getting to that aim point.
Yeah.
No matter what resources you provide, we're not going to get there. And all you can do is just communicate, and be honest and truthful in your assessment. Whether or not people listen to it, Did
you feel heard when you were communicating to them, like certain things weren't going to happen?
When I was able to communicate with commanders, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. There's always a challenge when we're dealing with kind of the filters of staff. But you got to get this school, open. I'm like, well, if I open that school, then all the kids will be killed.
Yeah.
I cannot open that school. Well, you have to, because it's aim point whatever in the campaign plan. So I honestly I would drag my feet, and I would say, the company that is in Soja is not going to put effort into opening a school that we know would lead to more destabilization in our area, and lead to more locals being recruited into the dudes that we're fighting. I mean,
that's one thing I don't think, certainly the State Department never understood. You can make a case for parts of Afghanistan to modernize, and maybe even westernize to a degree. But the first place to revert is going to be Panjwai, Kandahar. It fell so fast. And actually, Kandahar fell years ago. It's just been operating under a shadow government for quite a while. But they never understood that this isn't worth the effort. This isn't the hill to die on. Panjwai is not the hill to die on, because they're gonna give it right back to the Taliban the second we pull back.
Well, even the Taliban governor for Panjwai. So, like, I was getting a 3-way call, where I'd be up sitting with the district governor, and he would be able to get the shadow governor, on the phone, and we communicate, kind of. This is what we're trying to do. I mean, it's so far different from, I don't want to change kind of Afghan values.
Right.
I just want to create security. Right? I want these people to be able to live their freaking lives and grow their pomegranates or catch their little fish out of the Argandab. It was interesting having those discussions.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Just like what it's like speaking to the essentially the commander of your enemy.
Well, I mean, I was speaking through a district governor. So everything is spoken in Pashtun.
Yeah.
But it was interesting because the shadow governor and the district governor had grown up together. So they were like, had known each other for quite some time. But I mean, he was obviously getting orders and directions from somewhere else.
Right.
So even when we could find points that we agreed on, like he would quickly shift to why he couldn't. Oh, we agree on that point. Let me tell you why I can't agree with that point now.
Right.
If that makes sense. Like we find something we could find something that we could like, not create a truce on or an understanding on, but like he would quickly move to a reason that why I couldn't support it anymore, even though we agreed that this was the right thing to do for Panjwai. We're that close to getting him to come in and turn himself in. I mean, like literally that close.
What kind of effect would that have had? If he, would he just have been replaced the next day?
Yeah, 100%. But as we were trying to extend, I can't remember what the program was. We were getting Taliban leadership to come over to Jaroa's side.
We'd give him a job.
Yeah, and give him, getting a person to come over and being able to go, hey, look, what we're able to do. We applied the exact same thing in Somalia later, and getting a high up al-Shabaab leader to come over to the government side. I mean, was the guy replaced within a couple of days? Absolutely. But did it have the effect on some of the downtrace folks on the psychological and, being able to at least open dialogue or get them to question some things? Yeah, it did.
Yeah.
But yeah, that would have been nice if we could get that done in Panjwai. But yeah, y'all felt it. I mean, right below the surface, everybody there they were Taliban.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
They appreciated the opportunity to live in peace if we could get them there, but
yeah, they were
Taliban.
They were all Taliban at the end of the day. Yeah.
I mean, we started this thing in August 2020, something like that. In November of 2020, Panjwai fell.
Yeah.
Except for the district center, Massamgar and Zangabad.
Yeah.
That's it. Spurwangar fell. We're getting messages from everybody. And it was just business as usual. Like, yep, Taliban's in charge again. We're just living our lives. Yeah, so when it collapsed.
Well, we created the opportunity for them to see success.
Yeah.
Now, whether or not Jaroa was able to go, all right, let's stop pushing Tajiks and all that into this area, but of course, who else were they going to get to go in there? Because the Pashtuns weren't going to go in and or when they did try to do that through the ALP, I mean, y'all saw that stuff from when Kitching would report, hey, they got the dancing boys back, and I'd have to go there to whatever his name was, Zenadine or something with his makeup, and I'd be like, yeah, if I see one more kid brought to this checkpoint, like all of you will disappear. What? I'm like, I am very tolerant on Afghan traditions and all that type of thing, but I have certain red lines.
Yeah.
So he took that very seriously and did away with it. But a lot of stuff we weren't going to change.
Right.
I
mean, how did that come to your attention? Obviously the Chai Boy, Dancing Boy thing. Was it something you saw on the periphery? Were you getting like firsthand reports from anybody that?
Yeah, y'all were reporting it. Y'all's dude sitting up on top of the thing. So I immediately hop in, my TAC and move over there. And Zenadine and I had a very strained relationship even before he was recruited into ALP, because he was one of the Taliban commanders in that area that would come and meet with us. That the district governor would be able to facilitate. And then when he got hired by the soft guys to be the ALP commander, I'm like, what? Okay.
I remember the first time we saw him, Jay, our interpreter, was in our truck with us, and he would not get out of the truck. He's like, he's Taliban. We're like, what are you talking about? He's like, that's the Taliban. He can't see my face or I'm done. He was talking about Zenadine.
Yeah. I mean, that's a weird thing. Then you had that Najat checkpoint that the AUP ran. So we'd watch the some of the bad AUP go attack another checkpoint and civilian clothes, and then we'd watch them go back to the checkpoint, change back into their uniforms. Luckily, our AUP commander for the area, he wasn't like he'd say, he's like, I'm a very good Afghan. I'm not a very good Muslim, because he's drank. But I mean, that dude, if not anyone, would actually take action on, on those AUP folks that were kind of playing both sides.
Right.
Because he knew they had no life if, like, we weren't there or Joe wasn't there. He was pretty much done.
Yeah.
That's kind of one of the weird things, too, about, like, the local politics is how small it is, too. I mean, the next village over, it's going to be a completely different mentality, different
tribe, different subset. It was. And we could spend a day negotiating with some tribal leader thinking that we're influencing these 4 villages, and, nope, you influence this village, that village 20 kilometers down there, and this one that's over in Helmand province. And you're like, all right.
Yeah, I mean, that was such a weird aspect of the local culture, and that, I mean, it's a kind of a microcosmic example of Afghan at large.
Did y'all ever get to see the shuras that Kitching would host there on?
We pulled security.
I pulled security for him. Yeah.
And a lot of open and frank discussion and all that type of thing. Just, in that kind of society, if you don't have the ratifiers, really participating, if you're not the landowner, you only have so much power.
If that landowner's in Dubai, I mean, it's not like they're hopping on a sat phone and giving him a call, putting him on speaker in the shura.
Who's the other guy that had power? There was I can't remember what they called it, down in, was it Big Reggae? Mm-hmm. There was a town across like kind of the open sand stuff right up against that huge mountain set, and there was like I don't know, like it translated to like Oracle that lived down there.
Yeah, I kind of remember.
And like people would come from everywhere to see this Oracle dude who would like spit in their mouth, and that would give them something. And then it was like horse races.
The horse races were a thing. Yeah,
tried so hard to be able to get access to him, because it was kind of like if you've been to Iraq, the Saids, the dudes that would wear the black turban because they could trace their lineage back to Muhammad. And so they had a lot bigger effect on local population. That's kind of this guy wasn't a Said, but he was kind of had that same level of informal
layman Said.
I could never gain an audience with that cat, and tried so hard. But his influence extended outside of Panjwai. But I mean, just RC South was such a complex environment between Spin Boldock and Zari and Panjwai and Arghandab and I don't know, whatever that place up north was, which was amazing. I wish y'all could have gotten up there, because y'all saw some of the remnants of like the British forts, especially as you're headed over like towards Soja. And you get up there and there were still forts built by Alexander the Great. Yeah. I mean, holy smokes.
When I went to, when I was flying, I got to see some of that. So like, there's one in Kalat that's really impressive. But up in Farah, up near the Iranian border, there's a castle built into a mountain. They just it's the most incredible thing to look at. And you're like, why does this even exist? It protects nothing. It's absolutely mind blowing.
Well, it was cool, especially over there in the Shoja area, because they hadn't plowed it all up, but you could see the British fort and the remnants of the British fort, and then 500 meters north of it would be the old Russian combat outpost.
Yeah,
and then a kilometer over that way was a U.S. Tactical infrastructure piece. It was just interesting how each folks that came to fight in that area chose generally the same areas to establish some sort of influence, or try to establish security.
Spurwingar.
Yeah, something we've been trying to piece out is the history of Spurwingar. When we got there, it was like, the Russians built it, but
pretty sure the mound was built by Alexander the Great. Do you know?
Yeah.
We're trying to.
I mean, y'all talk to Rusty. I mean, that dude just spent more time thinking about Spurwingar and who piled that dirt up. I understood it was the Russians, but
that's what we were trying.
I mean, based on like there's a lot of those mounds in the Arghandab Valley, and it kind of looks, in my opinion, similar to a lot of the Alexander the Great structures. Like the mound by Najat is very, very, very old. So I think my theory, I could be wrong, is that the mound was built by the Byzantine Empire or Alexander the Great, something in that era. The plateau was the Russians. I don't know. The UN built the schoolhouse in the 90s, and that's how I think all that kind of came together. But
well, it was interesting. I don't know if you ever climbed up. So, like, if you went into Massamgar, which I tried to avoid. But
yeah,
if you went into Massamgar, the post itself, you could actually climb up to the top of the mountain. And you can literally see from Kaplayan all the way to Kenjikak to Soja. It was interesting standing up there and like trying to think through the different fights and the terrain and how it shifted and changed. It was just it was very different than any other fights that I've been in, because it was either all savannah in Africa or it was like, urban environment in Iraq, but I mean, you had everything in Panjwai. So
yeah, you had urban, you could be kicking indoors in the bazaar one day, or, low crawling
damn
through an
battalion
orchard.
commander would tell you, I want you to go to the southern part of the Horn and go clear out there. That's why I put I don't know if you remember the AWG dude that was with you, Sergeant Newton, or
I think so.
Collie.
Collie, I remember.
Yeah.
He's like a civilian dude that worked for AWG. So he had been a platoon sergeant of mine when he was active duty and all that type of thing. So they're like, hey, you get this AWG guy. Where do you want him? I'm like, holy crap. Y'all's fight had just started exploding. I'd spent a lot of time training with the company's organic to 123. So I'm like, dude, if you and I'd fought with him in the past. I'm like, go over there and, any way that you can help.
Yeah.
Whatever they don't have, if they're afraid to ask for it, you got to let me know.
Right.
Whatever they're struggling with, you got to let me know so that I can make that go away. He's a good dude, and he ended up dying, but he's good cat.
Dang. How did you kind of deal with the propensity of the local, like the ALP, AUP, to kind of exact like Afghan justice? So you probably remember the time your convoy rolled past, and then as soon as you rolled past, they shot the guy in the middle of the road. How did the consequences get, you like you said, if you do the small things right, you have discipline. But how can you do that when you have the Afghans shooting the guy in the back in the middle of the road?
Yeah. So you might not be able to realize it. It was hard to truly realize until after we left, but like that AUP commander, like I said, he said, I'm a good Afghan, but I'm not a good Muslim.
Yeah.
That dude really wanted to do the right thing.
Yeah.
So by communicating with him on, hey, this is what we just observed, or whatever the case may be, he would enact his own
right
AUP justice on the AUP. So whenever I go up there, there'd be, local police, not ALP, but the AUP, he'd have dudes locked in his jail there. I'm like, what is this guy? Oh, that guy's Taliban. So I'm going to transfer him to Razik, or this guy did an unlawful killing in the market. And they were all going to Razik. So
from what I understand, that's a one-way trip.
Who knows? But you only got, at the battalion level, and you only have a certain level to be able to influence everything that's going on. You're fighting just to understand everything that's going on. And even spending 9 months there and having pre-existing relationships with the Karzais and getting to do PDSSs, I'm sure we were just scratching the surface on,
that's one of the things that I've thought about, especially with Afghanistan, but just the GWAT in general. And maybe this is like totally impossible from a logistical or a strategic level, but it would almost make sense to have the same units go back to the same areas over and over and over again, not like SF and that they're trying to develop it. Just so you know those things and you can expect those things. Like it would almost like that would be a way to approach some of those problems, because if you're showing up every other year, every other 9 months instead of a different guy, like I wonder if that would provide any kind of continuity that would have maybe helped stabilize things a little bit.
Well,
better.
I mean, y'all know the deal. There's a lot of units that were deploying and deploying and deploying and deploying and deploying. So as we're doing like the competition phase, and we're like doing, the Atlantic Resolve and, the Pacific Pathways and all that type of thing, I think everyone's doing a lot of work to get against regional alignments of forces or allocation of forces. So, the same 3 armor brigades are rotating through Atlantic Resolve so that they develop more and more and more relationships and muscle memory. The 101st being regionally aligned against, Africa, and, they're getting their folks in there. And then, 4th ID, 7th ID, 25th ID being allocated, in a sense, regionally aligned to the Pacific. So they're doing all the exercises across, the umpteen million countries out there under the banner of, Pacific Pathways or some of the independent things. So I think everyone's trying to do the right thing and move in that way, so that when Private Rutherford interacts with Private, Abdi, and I come back in a deployment a year and a half later or 2 years later, I'm now Sergeant Rutherford and he's now Sergeant Abdi, and, that relationship continues to build. That's a hard thing to do, though.
It's hard to pull off,
Well, and like you said, at some point, A, it becomes unfair to the unit that always has to go to war.
Yeah.
And then B, it's unfair to the units that don't get to go to war.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a hard thing to talk about, but like, when you want to do your job, I mean, if you made me pick between Pacific Pathways and an Afghanistan deployment, I'm picking the deployment. Most people would. Not everybody, but a lot of people would.
Well, you know the deal. Like the first time you go to combat, like I said, it's fun for about 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And then it sucks. And everyone changes each time. It's always put a lot of thought into how people change when they're like in no kidding close combat.
Yeah.
The tolerance for laziness, or the folks that aren't going to do their job or don't speak frankly, or, and how that changes over time. And, so it's like the third combat deployment where suddenly people are more like, I want to get back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I need to get back to combat. It's kind of weird. So I do a lot of discussion with the folks here on why that is, and a kind of a operational kind of psychology type approach.
Yeah.
So I don't have the answer for it, but I mean, for 123, we had a great baseline of NCOs that go into Afghanistan. That was their 4th, combat deployment.
Yeah.
We were lucky, and like I don't know what the density was there, but I remember some of y'all's NCOs. Ochoa, I think was one. Ochoa, yeah. I mean, some of the other folks that y'all had and that were down in Cyclone Company in the 117 and 520 who came with a level of experience, and kind of imbued that experience in the folks that are around them. I don't know. I mean, y'all knew him better. I just remember Admiral Stavridis comes down and he's got that bandage around his arm, and he's like, hey, you getting a good workout in? He goes, no, sir, I got shot. It's like, oh, okay. I think it was that after Najat.
It was.
He got like hit by an AK-47 round ricochet or something in his arm.
Yeah.
We like to joke that he just flexed it out.
Yeah. Oh, that was funny. And Admiral Stravy just said, "Oh, you had contact." I'm like, "Yes, sir. We had contact right here on Sparrowgar like 3 days ago."
Yeah.
Oh, let's go. Let's move off. Let's move off the HLZ.
Oh man. Yeah.
That was pretty cool though, having the NATO commander coming down for
incredible.
The only time a NATO commander came down and visited a piece of tactical infrastructure at the tactical level was when Admiral Stavridis came down to Sparrowgar. Yeah. So you can imagine the impact on his ability to keep communicating to NATO allies and partners as they continue to contribute and all that type of thing. But what he saw there with y'all, I mean, that was the one and only time that someone with that level of authority and influence actually got down to that level. It was interesting because, like Kitchen and I went to Fletcher. After that, and Admiral Stavridis had retired, and he was the dean there or something like that. So it was always interesting discussions about what his thoughts were on.
Well, I know it featured prominently in his book, so it definitely was an experience that had an impact,
made an impression on him.
Yeah.
I remember. Yeah, I kind of forgot about that.
Yeah. I just remember he was there, and everyone was getting promoted and get their war. Like, it was just like they waited for weeks to give people their promotions or re-enlist or do their awards, because like, you're gonna do it with the 4-star admiral. I was like, all right.
So it was interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know. You had a bunch of doctors coming in there to try to understand why Panjwai was different.
Like MDs or like PhDs?
PhDs coming down from Kabul. Because y'all's efforts on the tactical side were having impacts in a large area. They weren't seeing these spectacular attacks that they were expecting to see being launched out. You had a district governor and district kind of leadership that was working closely with their American partners. Right. A lot of that was being communicated up. A lot of people came down to try to understand, why at least in the margins there was success being experienced there. I would have loved to read whatever they came up with.
It would be fascinating.
Yeah. So.
There's not a whole lot of like biographical information about Panjwai. Like, there's no history book on Panjwai. Everything's an approximation. Could you pull a reference from a book that talks about the Arghandab River? Maybe they're talking about Panjwai. Maybe they're talking about Arghandab. Maybe they're talking about Maiwan. Like, you have no idea. It'd be really cool to read something that's kind of authoritative about
definitive.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, y'all are capturing some of it.
Trying to.
Give me that koozie, and it's not a waste, or it wasn't a waste. And that's kind of, as I do find myself from time to time able to talk with folks that were there. All y'all's effort and all the blood that was spilled, and lives that were changed. It's hard to kind of put that into perspective. Did we make a difference? And I'm kind of come to a resolution that, one, more people came home alive or whole based on how we fought there, and two, we gave them a chance.
Yeah.
They just didn't seize that chance. Yeah. And sometimes you can't do anything more than give, the people a chance, whether it's in, a place in Iraq, or if it's in Bosnia, or if it's in Kosovo, or if it's in Somalia, or wherever the case may be. Sometimes the best we can do is give folks a chance, especially if it's not like go destroy that battalion and we can all slap hands and say it's done.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes all you can do is your job. Yeah. Sometimes it's not going to make a difference. Sometimes but doing your job is never a waste. It's not like, oh man, I can't believe I wasted my time doing my job. Like, no, that's what you're supposed to do. Like, put your nose down. You went out, you went on patrol, you found IEDs, you got into gunfights, and that was your job. That's what you signed up for. There's nothing wrong with that.
So we talk about the reflection. So like the cadets talk about that all the time. I want to reflect on this. I'm like, well, I've never had time to reflect on jack. So I'm doing that now. Like I told you, I pull out all those memorials on Monday, and would I have changed anything on what I directed? Bayonet or Apache or Bayonet 2 or Cyclones or, Black Hawk Company or Comanche Company, any one of them. I don't know if I would have fought anything differently.
Yeah.
You can always, on the margins, think of some things that you might have done different, but, for the most part, I don't think I, even with hindsight, would have pushed y'all to fight that fight any differently. Mm-hmm. I don't think, as I replay the scenarios in my mind and everything that we did, that there's not like a path to a better result than what we got.
Right.
Which was, I got it. There was casualties and there was amputees and there was people that were killed, but it was so much lower than what folks had experienced in the past because we fought differently. So I count that as a win.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we gave them the chance when, that popular uprising after we left.
Right.
So for at least a while, they had that opportunity.
Right. Do you remember the New York Times article?
No.
So it was like there was like a New York Times article that came out, said some kid had been killed. And so we went on like a wild goose chase to go find this kid in Big Reggae. I didn't know if you remembered it or not. It's just
no, I don't remember that one.
It was an odd one.
But you'd be surprised how many weird things like that would come down. No, I don't remember that one.
Stuck out to us.
It was it was just primo ambush, smelly territory. Like it was the New York Times would come out with this thing that like some kind of local bigwig's son or nephew had gotten kidnapped, and like the Taliban had decapitated this kid and dumped his body in the field. And then somehow it came down.
I do remember that. Yes, now I do. Yeah. I remember that.
So somehow it came down. It was in our AO, and we went out to Big Reggae, and they were like, "Oh yeah, he's in that field, 300 meters north, just over there."
Yeah, the one surrounded by
walls 3 compounds. Yeah, and we ended up getting like in a rolling firefight for like the rest.
Is that the
of
one where
day.
y'all got stuck in that mud? Y'all did some operation down there, and like every single vehicle got stuck in mud. And holy God, I think we spent like 2 days like recovering every single vehicle. I was oh God. So I was like, I need more bulldozers. I need an M88. I need more.
That was early on. That was one of our very first missions.
First kind of larger company mission.
That's when I got to climb that mountain on the southern edge of the district.
Yeah,
and set up that OP up there and look for smugglers.
There's some interesting things found up on that mountain.
So, really?
Yeah, in the electromagnetic spectrum. So
really
interesting.
Like aliens?
not for a podcast to discuss.
Fair enough. Okay, fair enough. All right. Wow. Mm-hmm. All I saw was my breath because I was freezing.
I mean, you probably remember the time when GPSs stopped working in Panjwai.
I do remember that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll catch it when we stop recording.
That's fun.
Yeah, that was well, I mean, as we kind of come to a close here, what are kind of some final thoughts? You've listened to a bunch of episodes. We always kind of give the floor to our guest at the end of the episode, but this is kind of a chance for you to speak to all the guys, and if there's anything you wanted to say to the guys of Alpha, Bravo, Charlie 2, Bravo 2.
Yeah.
You had quite a large footprint and quite a
I think at some point, including the Afghans, we were like 2,400 people in the task force.
It's incredible. Yeah.
It's just what I said before. Like, if anyone's like struggling with, was it a waste? Whether you were a person that was operating in the FOB and, or you were a, person doing refueling or distro or getting white milk to, Sparrow and Gar, or you were the infantryman out there in the fight, or the MGS 19 kilo that, is providing overwatch with a 105 or a mortarman or whatever the case may be, everyone kind of thinks through, like I said, was it worthwhile? Was it a waste? And the bottom line is absolutely not. More people came home whole. More people came home alive. Those Afghans that we were interacting with had the opportunity to do something different. So like I said, as I look back, absolutely 1,000%. That 9 months of ups and downs and good and bad and all that type of thing was absolutely worth it. And there was no better units to have in that battle space than that collection of 3rd ID and 2nd Infantry Division and different brigades from all over the place. And we were lucky in that regard. So it was absolutely not a waste.
All right.
Agreed wholeheartedly.
Yeah, we
really appreciate you making time for us and It's been
setting us up in West Point.
Yeah,
it's been
some
very
good
cool.
time. So we appreciate it. I'm glad you got to come on.
Well, I mean, I would throw one last thing out there, which is we talked about the power of stories and experience and all that type of thing. So I know y'all put this out there, but if there's folks that, want to help impact the next leaders and, of our Army and who are going to carry forward in the future fights when your gray finally does, or your beard finally does become gray, reach out to y'all. Or I'm not on any social media other than like LinkedIn, but I'm always looking for folks that want to come talk to cadets and tell their story, because that's what resonates a lot louder to these young leaders than anything else. So come talk about your struggles in any fight, or any training, or after a fight, what you struggle through. All that is valuable. And like we said, as more and more folks get further and further away from actually experiencing combat, it's more important that we get these older folks to come and be part of the discussion, so we can never appropriately answer the question why, but we get closer to
we can approximate.
So.
And if it's all right with you, if people want to reach out to you, they can contact us and we can.
Or like I said, I'm not on any social media, but I'm on LinkedIn. So definitely. Or if anyone needs closure on anything from the personal event, more than happy to help with that.